Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kamalini Ramdas, and it's a pleasure to have you all over here. And I'm very, very excited to introduce Alex Gorsky. Alex is the chairman of the board of Johnson & Johnson and also the chief executive officer. And we're looking forward to a very exciting 1-hour conversation with you, Alex. What I'd like to do, all of you know that Johnson & Johnson is the biggest healthcare organization in the world. What I'd like to do is just take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about Alex. Can I do that, Alex?
Well, thank you.
All right, great.
Sure.
So Alex was born in Kansas City, and then you grew up in the Midwest in a small town. Where was that, Alex?
Yes. When I was 11, I lived in Kansas City till I was 11, then I moved to a place called Fremont, Michigan.
Fremont, Michigan, okay. And I think around the age of 12, you decided, and your dad was an army, had served in the army, and he decided that he wanted to apply to go to West Point, which is the US military academy. And he did get into West Point, so that was one of his first big achievements. And when he was at West Point, he also decided that he wanted to apply for the Army Ranger School. So this is for the really tough guys, you know. And he got into the Army Ranger School, but that, you know, a lot of people who get in drop out. But he did actually get the Ranger tab. And you know, that was one of, again, early successes. And though I do have to say that I think his grades suffered a bit when he did that. But at any rate, after he graduated from West Point, he was in the Army for several years, 5 years, I think?
6 years.
6 years. And after that, he decided to take a corporate job, and you were with Janssen Pharmaceuticals as a sales rep. So Janssen, as you may well know, is the pharmaceutical division of Johnson & Johnson. And again, like many of you guys how many of you are MBA students? All right. So like many of you who have probably 5 or 6 years of experience, and then you came here to get your MBA. So Alex also got himself, you know, 6 years of experience at Janssen, and then he joined a school in the US, Wharton.
I couldn't get into LBS.
Never mind, Wharton is my alma mater as well. So he joined Wharton for his MBA. And now I'd like you to just think for a minute, just take a second to think about where you see yourself 6 years after you graduate from the MBA that you're getting right now. So when Alex graduated from his MBA at Wharton, he went back to Janssen. And 6 years later, in 2001, he was the president of Janssen Pharmaceuticals. And then he moved on also to have other high positions at Janssen. So you were the chairman, the group chairman of the EMEA region of Janssen Pharmaceuticals. And then also in the spirit, which many of you, I think nowadays, like to have more than one employer, he did have a few years with Novartis, again, heading up pharmaceuticals at Novartis, and then came back in 2008 to Johnson & Johnson, and has had a very diverse high leadership experience at Johnson & Johnson. So you headed up surgical devices, medical devices, diagnostics, and then having done all of that, in 2012, became the chairman of the board of Johnson & Johnson and also the CEO. So we're delighted to have you with us here today, Alex.
Well, thank you so much. I got to say, I'm really impressed with your homework. Yeah, it's as though she has my CV on her chip memorized. That's very impressive. I don't think I could get all those dates right.
We have to set high standards.
I like it. It's very good.
On the assignments.
Yeah.
So what I want to do, first of all, Alex, is, you know, as we all know, this is the largest healthcare organization in the world, but just to, you know, put some of the numbers out there. This is an organization which has 130,000 employees worldwide, which I think is about more than half the population of Iceland. We have someone from Iceland right there. Jonas, is that right?
That's correct. Great place to fish. I was there a couple of years ago.
And also, I looked up the World Bank Development Report this morning. There are, Johnson & Johnson had revenues last year of 73 billion. there are 126 nations in the world which have a gross national income which is less than 73 billion. So this is a really big organization and very diverse. You're all over the world, including, I'm sure, Iceland. What I want to ask you, which I think this audience will be very keen to hear, is how do you lead such an organization effectively?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Well, thank you very much again for that very generous introduction. And I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here with all of you this afternoon. You know, as was outlined, we had an opportunity when I was responsible for our pharmaceutical business in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Russia to live here in London back in 2003, 2004. And my wife and I and our son at the time, I remember coming here and we had a fantastic time. It was a great learning experience, professionally certainly, having to learn different markets and different product lines, different situations, but also just on a personal level. I always say that getting a global experience, I think, is so important, and you can't do it vicariously. You know, you have to actually move someplace, wake up, things smell differently, things taste differently, including the coffee. You have to get frustrated and to truly enjoy it. And so we love London, and it's always a joy to come back here. And I also really like to talk to students like you, you know, because as was said, it wasn't all that long ago, at least in my mind, about 20 years ago when I was sitting in your chair, thinking, wow, what's my career going to be like? What can I do? Where's it going to go? There's always uncertainty. There's always forks in the road. And what I can tell you is that I'm sure you've got a very bright and exciting future, and there are likely paths that you never imagined or dreamed of that are going to be in front of you. So shoot high, aim high, don't sell yourself short, because it'll be an exciting ride, whichever path you ultimately choose. But getting back to your question, it is a challenging one because look, we are in excess of $70 billion in annual sales. We're about a 200, and I'm not sure what the stock is doing today, probably $260, $270 billion market cap company. I think the last time I looked, we were about number 4, number 5 in the world in terms of market capitalization. 130,000 plus or minus employees, most of those outside the United States. Now, most of you probably know us for our consumer brands. In fact, when I say baby powder, Johnson's baby powder, and baby shampoo, how many of you can smell it? Is that a great brand or what? It gives you a connectivity. In actuality, it's only about 15% of our business. So we are very proud of the heritage that we have with our consumer brands, and they really touch you during an important time of life, whether you're a mother or a father or a child, obviously. But we're also one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. We're one of the top 5 pharmaceutical companies. And in that area, we're involved in immunology. We developed the first monoclonal antibody, the large protein that's now used in things like rheumatoid arthritis, but also psoriasis and a number of other conditions. We're in areas like infectious disease, where we have significant products. In fact, our chief scientific officer was one of the early leaders in HIV research. It's an interesting factoid. When Paul Stoffels worked in the Belgian Congo in the early 80s, he chose not to go into the military, but he chose to do public service in their healthcare area. If you were diagnosed with AIDS, you were expected to live about 2 years longer. Today, if you're diagnosed with AIDS or HIV and you're treated with some of the antivirals and other meds that are available, it's expected to maybe take 2 years off your average life expectancy. Pretty remarkable. And I'll come back to that later in terms of the meaning and the impact that you can have. But we're in neuroscience, we're in areas such as cardiovascular, a wide array of sciences. And then we're also the world's largest medical device company. So how many of you have ever had a stitch in your body, a suture? Okay, there's about a 90% chance we're part of your body. That's been reabsorbed. We're in contact lenses. We make a lot of the instruments that cut, coagulate, do things intraoperatively. We make diabetes test strips and meters, insulin pumps. So it's a wide array of technology. And I got to say, one of the best parts of my job is, in the morning, we were talking about this earlier, I can be walking into a room and talk about the next BTK inhibitor that's going to be used in hematology, or we're going to be talking about a new approach for an antithrombolytic. And then you walk in the next room and you're talking about, what kind of silicone hydrogel are we going to use in the next generation contact lens. And then I walk in the next room and we're trying to decide, okay, which celebrity do we use for the promotional ad for, Neutrogena shampoo? And so just intellectually, it's very stimulating because you get to walk across a wide variety of sciences. We're located in about 70 countries around the world. 55% of our business is outside the United States. We've been in China since the early 80s. We have a good presence. About 25% of our business is now in the developing markets, the fast-growing markets. It's an interesting world from an intellectual property point of view. The way laws are changing, the regulatory environment. So really the essence of the question is there's no way, I believe, you can effectively manage a company like that. Rather, you lead a company like that. And I think there's 2 or 3 things that are key to doing that. I think, number one, it starts with hiring 12 really good people or so to work around you. And at the end of the day, while I'm very fortunate and humbled to be the chairman and CEO, it's having the right team, the experts. And I'm so fortunate, I mentioned our chief scientific officer, but if I look at the diversity of backgrounds, of cultures, of intellect on my senior leadership team, each one of these people is really running probably the equivalent of a Fortune 1 or 200 company as a division within Johnson & Johnson. And so it's picking the right people around you. It's about picking people who don't look, talk, and think like you. Because if we do, then why the heck do I need them in the room? It'd be a lot easier to make the decision. But it's people who aren't afraid to challenge me. It's about people who just don't say, oh, let me dovetail off that. And by the way, let me introduce Flavia Pease, who's up here, who was also probably in your spot not too many years ago. She works with me, and she's actually responsible for coordinating our meetings of our senior leadership team. And she can tell you that we have, very tough debates and exchanges back and forth about the core strategies. And then you have to create that kind of environment because collectively, that's how we get to the right decision. So I think it's picking those 12 people. And of course, then they each pick 12 people, and they pick 12 people, and it goes through the organization. I think the other really important thing for us at Johnson & Johnson that I found is our shared value system of our credo. And the son of our founder, Robert Wood Johnson, it was interesting. It was about 71 years ago, in fact, on the eve of the company going public. And he owned about 48% of the stock at the time. Didn't do too bad with that. He was a bit paranoid that he was handing over his family business to do an IPO. And his father had run the business in a very family-oriented way. He would walk the shop floors and know people. And he was an interesting guy because on one hand, he really had little patience for government interference in business. But on the other hand, he was very progressive and was one of the first people, for example, to raise the minimum wage for workers coming out of World War II because he felt it was important to have a strong middle class that could actually buy products. And so he was an interesting character, and what he did is he wrote something called our credo, which he wanted to establish what he felt was the value system for Johnson & Johnson. And it's a 143-page document, or not page, Word document, excuse me. Big difference. And the first paragraph starts out saying, look, we have an obligation to the patients and the consumers who use our product. And I'd encourage you to Google it and check it out. But he went beyond that. He said mothers and fathers, doctors and nurses, because it's one thing to talk about patients, it's another when you talk about your own mother or father. And he said, we have a special trust because our products touch them. The products need to be right. The second paragraph, he talks about the commitment to employees, making sure that they have a great place to work where they can be developed, where they should be fairly compensated. They should be treated in those days as safe environment. And again, this is in the 1940s when everybody didn't talk about treating employees well. And then the third paragraph was really pushing the edge of the envelope. He said, we have an obligation to the communities in which we work and live. Because unless we are giving back, then we're not earning the right to participate in the business in the community. And again, that was a pretty, while today corporate social responsibility, I would guess, is high on your list of what you want to do. In those days, that wasn't necessarily cool. And it was a very explicit call. And then finally, he said, when we do all these things, the shareholders should get their return. And it was very interesting because he was the largest shareholder at the time. He put himself last. And that has become our ethos, our credo. And what I can tell you is it's a living, breathing philosophy in the organization. I've been in many, many meetings, big decisions where somebody will say, wait a minute, this isn't just a financial, this is a credo decision. And people step back. And I think it causes us to reflect. I'll be the first to say we don't always get it right. We made mistakes along the way. But what I can say is it always, I believe, helps us get to the right place. And I know it was a long-winded answer, but I feel that having an ethos, a value system in a company as a senior leader is absolutely essential. Because in the middle of the night when decisions are being made in China about the business, in the middle of the day when the decisions are being made in Minnesota about a research project, a guideline, a policy, and a process will only go so far. Then it ultimately depends on individual employees and leaders sharing a value system, a shared belief system, trying to do the right thing. And I think those elements, the right people, the right value system, are the most important things you can have to lead a company like Johnson & Johnson.
Thank you, Alex.
Sure.
Thank you. Can I ask you, Alex, since West Point was also a big part of your career, is there any parallel between what you saw in the military or how the military operates and what you're saying is very important about leadership?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had a great experience in the military. Look, there were some tough times, but I think a few lessons for me. I think one is that in the military, I think like business, it was always essential to basically have an attitude of we can figure this out. And not an arrogance, not an overconfidence, but there are a lot of situations in the military where you could be overwhelmed at any given moment with the situation, but having an idea, a spirit of we can go forward is very important. And by the way, in business, it's the exact same. I can't tell you how many people I have who love to admire problems. How many PowerPoints that wax on poetically describing the situation. But at the end of the day, you got to get something done. You have to actually move the idea forward. And one of the things I learned in the military is, hey, yes, you have a strategy, yes, you have it, but then it becomes how do you engage people? How do you engage fellowship as well as leadership to actually move an agenda forward? So that was a big lesson for me. I think another important lesson for me is don't ever confuse education and intelligence. I served with a lot of people in the military who were, as they would say in Boston, wicked smart. Now, they didn't have a chance to go to LBS. They didn't have a chance to go to Wharton. Maybe they were the first person in their family to graduate from high school, but they were a professional and they knew, and they were very bright in their own way. And never underestimate the, frankly, horsepower that they have just because they don't have a lot of initials behind their name. At the same time, I can tell you, I work with a lot of people with a lot of initials behind their name. They can't necessarily connect the dots as quickly as some of them. So for me, that was another aspect that was very helpful. And last but not least, I think in the military, there's a certain humility with leadership. And if you can't engage your team, and there were many times when when people worked for me, a sergeant might have had 20 or 30 years of experience, and he would look at me as a new young lieutenant and say, hey, sir, let me tell you how we're going to do things around here. And it may seem odd, but knowing that, yeah, you might be in a leadership position, but you've got a lot to learn. And before you're going to assert that leadership, you need to be very thoughtful, because it's not about you. It's about your team. It's about, the enterprise and, ultimately doing the right thing.
All right, great. And I think what you've said is that people can have different credentials, but also from your own experience at Wharton and over here, people come in with very different kinds of experience, and what that credential is, MA, political science or engineering, etc., the poets, the quants. What is your view on how these different types of credentials matter in the end, from speaking from your perspective?
Well, I hate to give you the economist answer. It somewhat depends. But what
we have poets and quants here, let me assure you.
So let me put it this way: if you want to be a large, a senior executive, a general manager, a CEO, I think having a blend of both sides is really essential. I was incredibly fortunate.
You're hedging your bets here.
No, I'll tell you. When I was as an undergrad, I was trained as an engineer. I also had the good fortune that I had a minor in political science. And while those engineering hard quant skills did come in handy when I came back and had to go through stats and finance and accounting and all those other courses. And by the way, those are still important skills for me to have, because I need to be engaged enough, to know what questions to ask. But I can tell you the hardest part of my job is the soft side. It's how do you connect the dots? How do you engage teams? How do you select the right people who are going to make some of those harder decisions? Sometimes, how do you make an ultimate decision that comes in front of you? Look, the easy decisions have been figured out. The people in the organization, by the time they get to your desk, there's usually a decision of what course is marginally better than another. And that depends on so many other factors. And so I think, have the quant skills. Those are important. You need to have an appreciation. While those are necessary, they're not sufficient. You've also got to have the soft skills that provide the glue, that ultimately help you move the agenda forward, that I think are as important, if not more important, in the long run in your ability to be successful.
Thank you. I want to, Alex, mention to you that, like you said, all of us know the smell of Johnson's baby powder and Johnson's baby oil and those products. This crowd is also very, very familiar with Johnson & Johnson, because we've had a long-standing relationship both with you and with Johnson & Johnson. You came a couple of years ago and spoke at the Healthcare conference. And the Healthcare Club is a major club here at London Business School. Crystal is, and others are leading up the Healthcare Club. And also, many of our students go to, you're one of our big recruiters.
We're always recruiting everybody. Always looking for that next generation.
Yeah, we're always, right. And so, but one thing I want to ask you is, yes, you're a huge organization, et cetera, but there have to be some threats that you face. And I want to, in particular, I want to also ask you about a specific example, because it is from the UK. I know that to actually develop a new drug is a massive exercise. Many of you may know it takes 10 years and billions of dollars to create that one blockbuster drug. On the other hand, nowadays there are many different ways that you can do innovation, and I found out recently about a company which had 1.8 full-time equivalents. Do the math quickly. What does that mean? 1.8 full-time equivalents in terms of their employees. So that's
you and me.
Yeah, almost. Right? Almost.
I'm the 0.8.
So, and this company was located in Cambridge, UK, and they developed a product which went through first round and second round clinical trials, and then has been bought by Johnson & Johnson for a large sum of money. You'll probably know exactly how much. So the question I have to you is, first of all, what does all of this mean in terms of how healthcare is changing.
Sure.
You can talk about this specific XO1. This is the name of this company.
Let me start with the bigger issue about what are some of the challenges, maybe the issues, and then I'll come to XO1 because it's an incredibly exciting breakthrough opportunity. I think a good example of some of the things I'll talk about. Look, I think one of the big issues that we face, and that is certainly on my mind, and you would say, well, I would expect that as being somebody in your role in a large healthcare company, just is frankly the challenge that societies, governments around the world are going to face over the next 30, 40, 50 years, and how do we provide high quality, value-added healthcare in a sustainable way. And why is that an issue? Well, one is people like me are getting older and getting older much faster. That's right. And it may seem, well, of course you're getting older, but the demographic bubble that we're heading into is nothing less than remarkable. Let me give you a few statistics. So in the United States right now, about 12% of our population is over the age of 65. So it's about 35 million, 40 million people. That's expected to go to 75 million people over the next 30 years. If you go to Japan, today they're already at about 25% of the population over the age of 65. That number is expected to go to 40% of the population over the age of 65 in the next 20 to 30 years. If you're in France, if you're in the UK, if you're in Germany, the numbers are pretty close. It's likely going to go somewhere between 25 and 30% at least. And what happens is when you turn 65, you tend to consume about 5 to 7 times the amount of healthcare that you do before you're the age of 65. So most of you in here are quants, do the math. And it's not only an issue for the developed world. If you go to the developing world, in China, today there's about 150 million people over the age of 65. It's estimated that over the next 30 years, that number will go to 350 million over the age of 65. So think of that, a population the size of the United States over the age of 65. And what's compounding that factor is that in developing economies, that today, and look, we can probably debate, should the US be spending 18% of GDP on healthcare, or is it better to be spending in the UK? I think it's like 10% on the UK. But if you go to the developing markets, it's about 2 or 3%. And as people move up the economic ladder, and as several billion people are added to the middle class over the next several years, which is very good news, by the way, throughout China, throughout Asia, throughout South America, after you have food, after you have shelter, what's probably the third thing you're going to consume more of? Healthcare. And so while that number may not go from 2% to 18% or even 10%, it will increase. And so if you take the demographic issue, if you take the rising middle class and you put all that pressure together and the economic stress that will place on government and providers, it is significant. And so when you ask me, what do I think are some of the macro issues, it is that. And I think as a result, we're going to see changes in healthcare, in systems, in delivery, in economics, in value over the next 20 or 30 years at a pace and rate and magnitude that we have not ever seen before. Now, it's a little bit like Dickens. While it's the worst of times, it's also the best of times. Because offsetting that, we are living during a time of just remarkable scientific advancement in healthcare. It was interesting, when I started in the industry in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of criticism in healthcare about Me Too products, not real innovation, that there were these these terrible conditions, whether it was HIV, tuberculosis, cancer, cardiovascular disease. If you fast forward to what's happening today, after billions and billions of dollars have been invested in those areas, it is remarkable at the advancement that's taking place. And who would have thought, even 5 years ago, that with a simple 8-week, 12-week regimen, you could cure hepatitis C? Cure. That's what scientists in our industry dream about, curing. I told you the facts about HIV. You thought about that years ago. It's gone from literally a death sentence to a chronic disease in that time frame. In cancers right now, the advancements that are being made, our understanding of the genome, of the proteome, and the underlying pathophysiology of disease is increasing at a rate because of the great science that's being done around the world that we never would have anticipated. I just hope I get to live long enough to be able to benefit, from some of those advancements. Okay. And so, that's the upside. I truly think we're entering a next generation where we're going to see breakthroughs in many of these areas that we could not have imagined. But to facilitate that, we as society, we as business leaders, working with governments, working with the healthcare systems, we're going to have to come up with new models to say, how do we balance this incredible, this remarkable innovation that's leading to new breakthroughs every day with also systems and in a value-added, sustainable, economically realistic way. And so I think that tension, and then this product that you're talking about in this company is a great example. More and more what we find is that science today is conducted very differently than it was even 30 years ago. When I first started in the industry, we were founded, Janssen Pharmaceutical was founded by a guy by the name of Dr. Paul Janssen, a remarkable individual. I mean, before CAD/CAM, before so many of the advances that you have in combinatorial chemistry, he could envision, some of the chemistry that we're talking about at the molecular level now in his head. And as a result, he developed more new chemical entities for new approaches than just about any other scientist has ever discovered. And you could walk into a lab in Janssen in Beerza, Belgium, and we probably had 70% of the world's knowledge in any one particular area among the 10 people in that room wearing white coats at the time. Well, today, science is conducted ubiquitously around the world, real time. It's connected. It's viral. It's very dispersed. And so you've got to be able, you're never going to be able to discover and develop everything yourself. You've got to have these connections, these networks, these ecosystems with healthcare systems, venture capital, companies tied in to make sure that you have cutting edge science. And so more and more we do it instead of just research and development, I'd say we do search and development. How can we quickly identify the next best approach, and then we bring it into Johnson & Johnson through an innovative partnership. And then we use our clinical, our regulatory expertise to scale it, our commercial skills, our reimbursement skills, and our global skills, then to make it truly a global platform or opportunity. And so in this case, we were in an area of thrombolytics, it's blood clots, to make sure that we have something that would stop. And there's always a unique trade-off with an agent to reduce blood clots, and that is if you do too much of a reduction of blood clots, you result in bleeding. And if you can't stop bleeding, that causes a lot of other problems. Just like everything in healthcare, there's a careful balance. And in this case, because of some early research we were doing, this 1.8 scientists happened to be participating in a clinical development program, but a patient came in that they were actually treating, and they noticed that as this patient was being treated, they had an antithrombolytic effect that was very unique to this individual, but they didn't have excess bleeding. And they quickly started doing some additional diagnostics that they related back to a certain factor in their system, in that patient system, and they were able to take that and replicate it, and now we have purchased that to create a brand new approach for an antithrombolytic in the future that we think will be a next generation, all based upon all those type of variables.
So it's also a serendipitous discovery, but then taken,
absolutely
recognized and taken.
But you have to have enough of the insight so that you recognize serendipity. So it's very exciting.
Exciting. And I think you mentioned, Alex, that before you came here, you were at 10 Downing Street. Is that right?
10 Downing Street, that's right.
And you mentioned that this is in connection with an innovation hub. Is that also related to this idea of trying to extract innovations, the search part of?
Yeah, as I said earlier, today when we try to innovate, the model has moved significantly from having a large research center with 30,000 scientists in it, each in their own particular area. And our chief scientific officer, a guy by the name of Dr. Paul Stoffels, had a vision about 4 years ago, building on this concept that I was talking about, where we need to be much more externally focused. And how can we spot and identify that really new up-and-coming science that may be in Harvard, that might be in Cambridge, that might be in Shanghai, that might be in the University of San Francisco, that might be in Israel. And so his thought was, instead of having large facilities with our own employees, why don't we put hubs in these areas that we've called Johnson & Johnson Innovation Centers? And in these hubs, we've got groups of scientists, business development people, finance people, IP attorneys, very diverse teams. In fact, I was just there this morning.
And they're all J&J employees.
They're all J&J employees. I would say 50% of them have been career employees. About 50%, as we found this morning, actually have joined Johnson & Johnson recently. So it's a nice blend. And by the way, that is a really cool thing that we saw this morning. Over half of the people in this room were women, okay, in leading edge industry and business. And what their mission is to connect into the ecosystem here in London, to make sure that that next new product that's coming out, that we built a relationship. And look, it may mean a handshake. It may mean a £300,000 investment. It may mean a £3 million investment, or it may mean an outright acquisition. And what it does is it gives us a way of ensuring we have the best science, a lot of optionality for our portfolio, and establish a great connection in the innovation system as a partner of choice. And so I got to tell you, it was very exciting. I visited our site in Boston a couple weeks ago, and of course they claimed they were the best. I was in London today, and they said, no, you don't understand. Cheers, this is the best one. And every time I go to one of those, I'm more excited and I'm more inspired for our future. I mean, I think they put up some metrics. In 2 years, they've already completed 65 new deals, and I think they have 300 new partnerships just out of this one in London. So it's pretty remarkable.
Great. So you've talked about how the world is different and innovation is different, and information travels virally in relation to innovation, but information travels virally regardless. And one of the issues with a company like yours, which is it 130 years old? Yeah. So that old, you have a brand, and at the same time, something that happens somewhere which is negative to the brand can immediately be distributed. So how do you actually deal with that, and how do you maintain, and I mean, we all know Johnson & Johnson, but how do you make sure that 100 years down the road?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and you're absolutely right. Things travel around the world like this, and there's a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation. And in today's world, sometimes it's who gets there first rather than who gets it right. And it really gets back to what we were talking about earlier. It's making sure that, one, we spend a lot of time talking about our value system. We spend a lot of time with putting processes and systems in place. And look, and the other thing that you've got to do is make sure that your leadership team is acutely aware and engaged at all times. I mean, I don't think that there is a single magic solution, so to speak, to address that. But in a large multinational global organization, it's absolutely a higher level of complexity in today's world than it was 10 years ago.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, good. I'm going to be opening up in a little bit for you guys to ask questions to Alex. I do want to ask you one thing, Alex, which is related to where you see the future of pharmaceutical companies in general going, and I want to share with you. So a lot of what's happening today is innovation in healthcare is not just about new drugs or new science. A lot of it is just about new ways of delivering healthcare. And I think we were talking earlier about, for instance, the idea that if you're a patient who has diabetes or some cardiac issues, and you need to go regularly to see your doctor, typically the way you would do that, touch wood, most of you probably are not yet in that category, but the way you would usually do that is you would go and meet your doctor one-on-one, right? But there are innovative approaches today where instead you could go and meet the doctor, but with a group of patients where you still get your one-on-one appointment, but others are in presence and listening to what's happening. Yeah. That's just one example of this sort of changing delivery. And so my question to you also related to, I know that you guys at in Janssen have Janssen Innovations, which again is an organization that has hired several of our MBAs and is an amazing organization with only 50 employees in it. It's like a startup within Johnson & Johnson. Sure. Want to hear from you of where you think the world is going in that regard, regarding service delivery.
Absolutely. Well, look, this is one of the reasons why I think healthcare is such an exciting time and frankly a great future for you to consider. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of you sitting out there right now thinking, okay, you're going to go into the finance world because you're at LBS and you're going to end up here in London or Wall Street. If you do, good on you. I wish you the best. But I also have to say that I think healthcare, because of the complexity that I was talking about, because of the massive amount of change, is an incredibly exciting area, and frankly, an area where we as a society need great minds. We need great innovation. We need people who want to take on big, challenging issues. And by the way, I think it's an area where you can do good and do well, where you can make a difference in people's lives, knowing every day that you can fundamentally change, and in a system that needs change and that will be undergoing a massive amount of change in the next 20 or 30 years. And I've always found in my career, sometimes people say, well, make sure you get into the right situation so you can do. I don't agree with that. I've always found that when you walk into some of the most challenging situations, that's where when you knew you could make a big difference. Because when everything's going okay, it's tough to rock the boat. When things are in turmoil and in change, you can really step in and have a direct impact in a number of different ways. So, I would say that, overall, as you're thinking about your career and what you want to do, what direction you ultimately want to take. But relating to the way the business is going to change, I think part of the change in healthcare that we'll see in the coming years is a maturation similar to what you've seen in other life cycles. And let me give you a technology example. We are a pretty big technology company in terms of the number of laptops we have, the systems that we use, the ordering processes that we have, the level of connectivity, information, data aggregation. It's a big system. 30 years ago, we would go to IBM and we might buy our laptops. You might go to Lotus, you'd buy your software system. You'd go to Xerox, you would buy your printer. You might go to some other company to run your system behind. And each one of those companies had representatives that came in and that knew every one of our administrative assistants' names and took them out to lunch because they were going to help order the printer. And it was very, dispersed in the organization. That's changed radically. Today, we have a contract with a company like IBM where for X thousands of dollars, they take care of everything. They take care of the computer, they take care of the software, they take care of our systems. And if that one breaks, it doesn't matter. It's a whole packaged approach. It's a business-to-business partnership level of connection. Well, if you think about medicine today, medicine is still pretty much a fee for service. So that means when you go in, a certain procedure costs X amount or is charged, and this differs by country, of course. A suture costs X amount, this device costs this amount. I believe in the coming years that will change to you will be reimbursed for an episode of care or for an outcome. So that will mean instead of paying for 27 different medical devices or products that are used for a knee or hip procedure, the knee or hip procedure will be reimbursed in X amount. And it will be required that you actually have a good outcome and that you don't have a readmission 2 weeks later due to a post-operative infection, because if you do, the hospital or the system will be on the hook for that as well. And so I think as systems changed, companies like Johnson & Johnson, who have a diverse set of products, will bring together new offerings. So you may have combinations of products, all part of a unique offering and partnership that will transform the way the business transaction take place. Instead of a company to just a physician or single, it will be almost a business to business.
of course, with the surgeon and the physician intimately involved to ultimately doing what's right for the patient. I'm talking about the business transaction portion of it, will be a different kind of relationship. And so that's where I think having scale, having depth, having breadth, having multiple offerings, having a compliance tool along with your pharmaceutical product, because we know, look, products, as I mentioned, they only work if you take them. 50% of drugs are not taken the right way. It's a compliance issue. Even products that are life-saving sometimes only have compliance rates of about 80, 85%. You could have a dramatic impact just if patients are compliant. Just if patients are better educated about a condition. We know already that if you set the right expectations for a joint reconstruction procedure before, the patient is going to have a better outcome 20 to 25% of the time. And so that's where we believe having a comprehensive suite of solutions, of services, along with products. Now, it's important that I mention here, we still need to innovate. We still need to make really good products that make a difference for people. But again, while that's necessary, I don't think it'll be sufficient. You'll also have to have other offerings around it to, I think, be as competitive, frankly, and as value-added as you'll need to be in the future. So I think it's an exciting opportunity.
Great, excellent. Let me open the floor up here, and can I suggest that when you ask a question, if you can introduce yourself, just say a few words about who you are so that Alex gets a sense of where you're coming from with your question. Who would like to go first? And what I'll also do is let's take maybe 3 questions, and Alex, then you can, give you some time to think.
No,
all right, yes.
Hi, my name is Alexei. I'm an MBA 2016. Thank you. My background is in finance. I used to work for a central bank in asset management. I was wondering, you mentioned about your experience as a CEO and the challenges that you face, having the right team. You mentioned about the vision that you have of the future of healthcare. And also we heard about your CV. But can you mention us, how was the process of getting up there? Like, what were the challenges? What did you find very difficult? Kind of skill set did you find in each of these steps? I think that would be really interesting to hear from you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Should we take a couple other questions
Yeah, that's
and
fine.
then?
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Sandeep from MBA 2017. Thanks a lot for sharing your wisdom and words with us. Appreciate it a lot. I come from India, and my question has to do with the pharmaceutical division of the business and its approach in emerging markets. You spoke a lot about the fundamental values and ethos of Johnson & Johnson, but you also spoke about your responsibility to shareholders. It's well and good if both go hand in hand, but I would imagine with respect to the pharmaceutical division and for emerging markets, both of them do not necessarily always go hand in hand. So in those situations, how do you make the right decision?
Great question. Okay.
Thank you. Should we take one more, or do you want to?
I'll take
answer?
those 2.
All right, good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Great questions, by the way. I appreciate it. And I like my namesake up there, Alexei. So, Gavodu Poruski Ochempolo. But look, I started as a sales representative as part of a leadership development program. And what I found is that getting into the industry, learning it, really understanding the customer is something that's very important. And putting yourself in the customer's shoes, having empathy with them, understanding how they make decisions, what pressures they're under, what trade-offs they're trying to make on a daily basis, again, is something that's critical in any industry in which you choose to make your career. And so I think having a customer-facing role is very important. The other thing that I found is that being able to lead teams, people, to identify, select, recruit, hire, develop, promote, and occasionally let people go are critical skills. And most often what I found is that it's not an intellectual gap that inhibits somebody from moving up the ladder, so to speak, but it's usually their leadership skills and their inability to take their individual capabilities and skill sets and be able to, work with the team and help make the team better.
I mean, I'll frequently say to our leaders that, look, one, performance is absolutely essential for you. You've got to be able to perform in good markets and bad markets, in different geography markets. So I think getting as many different experiences as you can, and by the way, you should be running towards turnaround situations. Don't run away from them. And sometimes I'll see people at the midpoint in their careers trying to be a little too savvy and cagey about how am I going to get my career just right. It seems like every district that I ever took over was number 65 out of 63 districts. And you walk in and you go, oh my gosh, well, why do you think they put you there? To make a difference, to turn it around. If you think you're going to walk in, now, once in a while it's good to walk into a very good situation and be stressed and challenged and make it even better. So that's important. The other aspect is this one of leadership, of how do you make teams of diverse people, not of your own choosing, where you inherit a group of people that you may not even really like, but you have to help make them better. How do you inspire somebody who has a very, if I look around this room, one of you is probably sitting up there saying, you know what, my career goal is I want to be in your job someday, Alex. Somebody over here says, you know what, it's all about the money. I just want to do a lot. Somebody over here says, I want to make a big difference to society. Somebody else says, I want to do all three. Well, you've got to motivate people differently. The days where you're the leader and get in line because you're going to do it, that's gone. I've always found the best leaders are those that can reach out and touch whatever that unique, driver, that motivator for you, and they connect with that. And they help make you better. They help make you better than you thought you were on your own. And so the ability to do that as a leader I found to be very essential, because at the end of the day, it's not about what I do. It's about, what the team is doing. And look, and I think the other aspect for me is you have to have an unquenchable curiosity and desire to learn more. I'm sorry to tell you, but when you graduate, when is it, next June? Or 2 years? Whenever? It's not over. You can never stop learning. The half-life of data and information today, and I'm not cutting the financial formulas that you got to be doing in the accounting and everything else, it's probably about 28 months, because it's changing so fast. And so when you leave here, the most important thing that you leave with is a desire and an ability to learn. And leaving here with that kind of an outlook, I think is, I love people when they turn the water faucet on, they go, why is the water coming out that way? Not to just accept it for coming out. That are always, trying to figure out what's behind that, how can we do it better, who are driving. That learning ability, adaptability is absolutely critical. I like people who are global. I found that you've got to be a global citizen, especially if you want to be in a senior leadership role. And I mentioned the benefit of that. And what I would say to you is, professionally, given if you're in business today, the chances a big portion of your business is going to be outside. You have to understand those customers, those systems. But I also tell you, personally, I think it makes you a more well-rounded individual. And I've got to say, when we moved here, it actually brought us closer together as a family, I think, in many ways, because you didn't have all the distractions that you do. So those are some of the aspects that I would say help me get from here to there. Okay? So, good question. And I think for all the reasons I was talking about earlier, when you think about the important role of emerging, developing economies and healthcare systems in those countries, when you think about the economic pressures, the responsibility that we have in many cases, and we take it as a credo responsibility to make sure that we're assisting not only in producing good innovation, but making sure people get access to innovation. I mean, if people can't get access to the innovation, then frankly, we're not fulfilling our mission. Now, what we've also done is we've made strategic choices in some cases about what areas we're going to be in and what areas we're not going to be in. In our case, we've made a deliberate decision to participate in the innovation portion of the industry. We do not think that we can be an effective or efficient generic company, given our model. Now, it doesn't mean that we won't work with generic companies at time to time. We do, to ensure, but we know that That's not where we believe we can make the biggest difference and add the most value. However, what we do believe is that when patients or societies or consumers literally cannot afford our medications, then we try to work with different programs to make sure that our drugs can still be available. So for example, in Africa right now with HIV, we basically work with the governments in Africa, and we've provided them our intellectual property, working with generic manufacturers to make sure that the drugs can ultimately get to the patients. We think that's consistent, with our credo and who we are. So you're right, there's a balance. I mean, we run a business. We also feel like we have a huge social responsibility, and navigating those two simultaneously, I think, is one of the most important things we can do. Thank you. Are you going to pick him? Or you want me?
You go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, is it Switzerland right there? Yeah. Okay. That's not your name, but maybe.
Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for the talk. My name is Krishna. I come from India. I used to work in a healthcare startup which had innovative baby incubators for areas which did not have healthcare.
Okay.
My question is more at a personal level. With the responsibility on your shoulders of leading such a huge organization, how do you deal with stress?
Can I answer that one straight away? Okay. She's the teacher. Krishna, great question. And actually, I think, given our time, I think one of the most important pieces of advice that I would give you is the importance of taking care of yourself. Now, as I look out there, most of you, I'm guessing, are in your late 20s, maybe early 30s in a few cases. You're feeling pretty darn good right now, right? I mean, physically, intellectually, maybe not emotionally, but physically and intellectually, you're kind of, you're in a really good place right now. And you know what? Enjoy it. Because it's a very special time in your life. But what I will tell you is that over time, things do start to happen. And particularly if you're in one of these jobs, they're stressful. There's a lot of long hours. I flew over, my wife and son will attest to this. We flew over yesterday and got on the plane at about 7 p.m. and probably got 4 or 5 hours of sleep, maybe a little ambient nap. Landed, had meetings all day yesterday, and I think we got done with dinner at 10 or 11 last night, had one this morning, and there's a lot of bad chicken dinners. There's always an email that you should be attending to. There is significant stress that you feel because things will not always go your way. And while I've got the privilege and the honor of working for the company I do, Johnson & Johnson in healthcare, it's so important to take care of yourself. 75% of the diseases that we deal with every day are affected in a significant way by lifestyle, by behaviors. And what you find is that, little things add up over time, and 1 or 2 years go by, and there's things that you can do in your diet. Eating sensibly, watching what you drink, staying away from, my dad gave me the 2-drink rule. He said, Alex, the 2-drink 10 p.m. rule. Nothing good ever happens after 2 drinks and 10 p.m. And that was great advice early in my career, okay? It was very good advice because I've seen other things happen. Being active, being physically active. I will admit I have an addiction of sorts to fitness, and that works for me. That's the way that I manage my stress. It doesn't work for everybody. And it doesn't mean that you have to run a marathon or triathlon, but be healthy. Keep moving. Your body's a wonderful gift that's been given to you. And if you carve out 15, 30 minutes a day, take a walk, take a run, get into a passion for fitness one way or another, but take care of yourself. Because doing that and making it part of your daily routine will have a huge impact when you're 55 and when you're 65. And the data shows, by the way, that your quality of life, not only will you live longer, but your quality of life when you do turn 65 will be immeasurably better if you've taken care of yourself. Learn how to get rest. Be connected with your family. Learn first things that are first. And that's a tough one. You know, when you walk in the door, is the first thing you're doing checking your email? Or are you putting it down? And are you there? You know, as my wife said, are you there? The stereo's on, or the lights are on, but the music's not playing? You know, are you multitasking? And look, there are always going to be stressful times. You have to try and balance them. But what I would say is take care of yourselves. What you don't want to do is work your tail off your entire career, working long hours, making major sacrifices. You have a family. You then retire, and the next day you have an untoward health event. And you don't get it. Your family, not you, your family doesn't get to benefit from all the sacrifice, all the good work that you've done because you didn't make the time to take care of yourself. So find your way, but definitely make that a priority.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those excellent questions. And now I feel like we're just warming up and we could spend all day like this. But on the other hand, unfortunately, we have to bring this to an end. So it's been a great honor, and it's been absolutely fantastic for us at London Business School to have you with us here, Alex. Thank you so much.
You've been a wonderful host. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Hey, and one final shot. If you are interested in healthcare in Johnson & Johnson, if you go to our website and forward a message to me, we'll make sure we follow up. Take care, everybody.